All right. Well, let me go ahead and say good evening to everyone. Very, very thankful to have another opportunity for all of us to meet together this evening and to talk with one another in relation to a disease that is sweeping all throughout our world, not just simply here in British Columbia, but of course throughout the United States and literally throughout the world. We're going to be talking about hypertension this evening, and I'm very grateful that there's much to learn and there's much to apply, but the good news is there's much to expect. There's some wonderful blessings that can come to us. So if there are any of you here tonight even that are afflicted with this disease, I am very grateful that there's some really good news that we can all look forward to partaking of and allow it to be a blessing in our lives. And without any further ado, I want to go ahead and get started. But before I do so, I just want to have a brief word of prayer. So if you'd be so kind, just bow your heads with me. Father in heaven, I just want to thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to talk with my friends, my brothers and my sisters, to be able to talk to your sons and your daughters about ways that you have put within your words and within true science of how we can overcome many ailments, including hypertension. I pray that you'll be with us tonight. Make your words plain. May we sense your presence. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about hypertension. If we can go ahead and get the screen up here. And sure. No problem. Computers do freeze sometimes, even apples. So we're going to talk about hypertension. Now, one of the things it's called is the silent killer. And, the reason why is because one of the things that's very interesting about hypertension is that you don't get a lot of forewarning. Sometimes the forewarning is, in fact, the ultimate warning, which can be a heart attack, it can be a stroke, and that's why generally in the medical world, it's called the silent killer. So we're going to just take a look at it. I'm going to have a couple of video clips that we're going to be looking at, and it'll just kind of make some things plain for us. And then I trust that from that, we can leave here more edified, more intelligent, and having more options in the event. And I want you to take good notes too, because sometimes you may be okay, in other words, you're not afflicted, but you might know people who are. And as a result of that, it is wonderful when you can take down this information, you can go back to those whom you know, whom you love, and you can say, hey, check this out, take a look at this, why don't we consider this? And then we can go ahead and see some great things take place. So now what we're going to do is I'm first going to play a little video clip that just kind of introduces us to hypertension. What is it? How does it work? Why do people get it? And then we'll take it from there. All right, so let's take a look at the video clip, and then I'll come back.
Do you know if you have high blood pressure? Find out how you can prevent or control it. High blood pressure, when left untreated, can damage the blood vessels in your body. It hardens the arteries as cholesterol and calcium builds up. Over time, the arteries narrow, restricting blood flow and damaging critical organs like the heart, brain, eyes, and kidneys. The first sign of high blood pressure affecting the heart is the thickening of the heart muscle. It now struggles to pump blood into the circulatory system through narrowing arteries. Left untreated, the condition worsens, and all this time you do not feel any symptoms. Over time, high blood pressure further narrows the arteries, cutting off blood to the heart. When your arteries become critically narrow, or if a piece of the blockage breaks off, it may result in a heart attack. A heart attack can cause permanent damage to the heart muscle by affecting its ability to pump blood, resulting in heart failure. High blood pressure is a leading cause of kidney failure. Damaged blood vessels in your kidney affect its ability to filter and clean blood. Left untreated, the kidney will eventually fail and dialysis or a kidney transplant will be needed. In your eyes, high blood pressure can affect the tiny arteries of the retina. Bleeding and blockage can result in blurred or lost vision. When arteries harden in the brain, you can suffer a stroke that damages brain tissue. Some arteries may rupture, causing bleeding or hemorrhage. This can result in slurred speech, paralysis, and loss of consciousness. Do you know if you have high blood pressure? Find out how you can prevent or control it. Eat healthy, relax, lose weight, and take all medication given by your doctor, and you can control high blood pressure and stay healthy. Talk to your Kaiser.
And so it is that, this is the very typical concept that's going to be shared with individuals if they are stricken with such a disease as high blood pressure. They're going to talk about, yes, it is true that you need to eat right. You need to go ahead and maybe have a good exercise regimen, but don't forget to take also your good drug medications. And we're going to talk about drug medication a little bit this evening as well. And what happens is when individuals do that, often that word, I don't know if you heard it or paid very close attention to it, but the word control the disease. Well, this is the thing. If you're looking to control your disease, then you can probably look to the nearest clinic, and I'm sure there will be many who will help you with that. But if you are looking to overcome or to be healed from your disease, there's only one place to look, and that's up. You see, the Bible presents a principle to us that is very profound. And what it says is what we read last night for those of us who were here. It's stated in the book of Exodus, chapter 15 and verse 26, God says, I am the Lord that heals you. And a lot of times that's the real point, isn't it? If you want to manage a disease, man may be able to assist with that. But if you want healing from a disease, that's something that is a prerogative of God and God alone. And so it is that I believe that we didn't come here to learn about management. We didn't come here to learn about disease management. We wanted to learn about healing. And therefore, is there a program, is there a plan by which we can look to, number one, God's words of inspiration, number two, at true scientific evidence and get to the bottom line of this thing called hypertension, and then, of course, how we can more than likely, by the grace of God, overcome it. Well, the first thing we want to consider is this. When we looked at blood pressure, if we were to just generally ask the question, what is blood pressure? Well, the answer is very simple. Your heart pumps approximately 1,900 gallons of blood through the blood vessels in your body every day. That's a ton of blood. Going on, blood pressure is the force applied against the walls of the arteries as the heart pumps blood through the body. The pressure is determined by the force and amount of blood pumped and the size and flexibility of the arteries. So that's your general blood pressure. Therefore, when you think of what is high blood pressure, it's very simple. When it's difficult for blood to flow through your blood vessels, the pressure against the walls of your vessels will increase. This can cause high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. If you ever heard of the boa constrictor, does it kill its prey by venom? No, it does not. How does it kill its prey? By constricting it, squeezes it. When you think of hypertension, you think of what's called vasoconstriction. The vessels are being constricted. Something is squeezing it. Something's causing a narrowness within it where the heart now is going to have to apply more pressure to get the blood through, hence high blood pressure. Now, I see some of us wearing glasses tonight, so I would imagine you know what I'm talking about here. When you think about dilation, if you get glasses, more than likely you had to have your eyes dilated. And when your eyes are dilated, are they closed or open? They're open. So when you think about high blood pressure, that is when we're going through vasoconstriction. The vessels are being constricted through something that's happening that's adverse to the normal process of the body. What we want is to go from vasoconstriction to vasodilation. We want our vessels to be able to open so that the blood can flow through nicely and the heart does not have to apply undue pressure to get the blood to flow through the vessels. So that's what we're looking for. So when you think about hypertension, again, the issue is it's difficult. Something has made it difficult for the blood to easily, smoothly go through the vessels. Now, the next question is, who has it? Who is it that really has hypertension anyhow? Who is it that has it? The statistics tell us about 70 million American adults, which makes up 29%, have high blood pressure, and that's 1 of every 3 adults. Now, one of the reasons why this is good to know is because the statistics, because the lifestyle in the United States is very typical to the lifestyle that we would see in various parts of Canada, including British Columbia. Therefore, the stats are very, very similar. Though it may not be exact, it's very, very similar. So number one, 1 out of every 3 adults have it. And then number 2, High blood pressure costs the nation $46 billion each year. This total includes the cost of health care services, medications to treat high blood pressure, and missed days of work. So a lot of people have this disease. Now, generally, we all have something called systolic and diastolic numbers that we look at when we think of hypertension. Right now, our goal is to get to what is known as 120/80 or below. If you can get 120/80 or below, that would be considered to be perfect or very ideal blood pressure that an individual would have. The problem here is that there's 1 out of every 3 adults are well over the 120/80 marks. So as a result of that, hypertension is their reality. Well, let's continue. It is not just simply that a lot of people have it, but especially in the quote-unquote African American community. To the point, African Americans have it over 1/3 more often than Caucasians, and those 18 to 44 years of age have it more frequently than Caucasians. So sometimes you'll find that in demographics, there are certain groups that may be stricken with the disease more than others, even though it affects a large number of people generally. Continuing, it's not just African Americans, but it's also women. I want you to look at this here. Women are about as likely as men to develop high blood pressure during their lifetimes. Now watch this. However, for people younger than 45 years old, the condition affects more men than women. So typically, women, once you get around younger than 45 and under, you're going to see more men stricken with the disease than women. However, notice, for people 65 years old or older, high blood pressure affects more women than men. That's a very interesting statistic. So below 45, more men than women. Once you get to 65 or older, you're finding more women than men. Continuing, women have hypertension less often than men until menopause is over. And that's why the numbers right around 65 make sense. And so it says, then soon after, they have it just as often as men. So hypertension is definitely not prejudiced one toward the other. It affects men, it affects women. It affects Caucasian, it affects African American. It affects Indian, it affects Asian. It affects many different aspects of our society today. But also, hypertension actually affects even children. You will notice that this is an article that came out just a couple of years ago. Salty snacks, extra pounds send blood pressure soaring, especially in U.S. children. And again, I want you to remember, whenever you think of the lifestyle of those in the United States, we can very much see the same lifestyle. You have the same KFC that we have in America. Can you imagine that? You have the same Subways, you have the same McDonald's, we have a lot of the same things, it's the same lifestyles. So what you see going on is what we call the lifestyle in Western society. In fact, if you would remember these 4 letters, remember WDLD. I want you to remember that. WDLD. What does that stand for? That stands for Western Debilitating Lifestyle Diseases. When you think of high blood pressure, that's a WDLD. It's a Western Debilitating Lifestyle Disease. And I would like to say that this type of stuff is just limited to places like the United States, Canada, but it's even in places like certain parts of Africa. I remember the first time I had the privilege of getting a trip to go to Africa to do some missionary work out there. And when I went to Johannesburg, they call it Joburg. And when I went there to Joburg, I remember that when I got there, I was so excited. I mean, I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna come in contact with my roots. I'm gonna get a chance to see Africa. I'm not gonna learn about it from a book. I'm gonna touch the soil myself. So I'm real excited when they were saying, all right, we're landing in Africa. And I'm landing in Africa, and I'm ready to see some serious, wildlife. I'm ready to see all sorts of things. But when I got out of that airplane, walked through the airport, and got on the roads, I was like, wait a minute. This looks just like America. And I mean, I was thoroughly disappointed. Then, when I finished doing my work in Johannesburg, I ended up going to Botswana. I said, well, maybe Botswana is a little different. So I went over to Botswana, and when I went to Botswana, they took me to one of their malls, and I was like, man, their malls look like our malls. And then it said national breakfast. And when it showed the picture of the national breakfast, it was eggs, toast, a cup of coffee, orange juice, and a little bit of bacon and ham. I'm like, that's American, that's not African. And so it is that you find that the Western lifestyle has absolutely affected all over the world. It's not just something that's over in the West, but it's also in different other parts of the planet as well. So again, when we look at these statistics are pretty much real. and applicable to any place where the Western lifestyle is dominant. So that's why I want you to remember WDLD, Western Debilitating Lifestyle Diseases. And that's exactly what hypertension is. All right, so let's continue. Salty snacks, extra pounds send blood pressure soaring in U.S. kids. Here's what they found. Spurred by too much salt and too many extra pounds, blood pressure in America's kids and teens has gone sky high. It says creating a young generation at risk for serious health problems, including heart disease, stroke, and worse, which is typically death. Can you imagine that, you would think that, I remember growing up and thinking that these diseases were reserved for older people. And this was something that you would never associate with children. To the point, look at the age groups. Watch this. I thought that this was absolutely startling. The percentage of American children and adolescents ages 8 to 17. It says who have high blood pressure, a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, organ damage, heart attacks, and strokes, climbed 27% over 13 years, according to researchers from Harvard Medical School, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and other institutions funded by the National Institutes of Health. So this has become something that's really affecting everybody. It's affecting black, it's affecting white, it's affecting young, it's affecting old, it's affecting male, and it's affecting female. So hypertension is truly no respecter of persons. So it's for these reasons that we definitely need to get an understanding of this thing. We want to get a good grip on it, understand what it is, and again, how by the grace of God, we don't have this thing in our lives. Because again, the nickname to hypertension is the silent killer. Don't lose that. As you saw in the video clip, it's a silent killer. Sometimes the first discovery of it might be our last discovery, a heart attack or even a stroke. So this is why we're going to have to function by a very important principle. I want you to remember this principle not just tonight. I want you to remember it for the rest of your life. This principle is prevention is better than cure. I want you to remember that, not just tonight. I want you to remember it for the rest of your life. Prevention is better than cure. Let's not neglect ourselves and then something horrible takes place and now we're going to spend the rest of our lives and the rest of our money trying to get cured. Why don't we stick with the principles of prevention? Because prevention is better than cure. Let's continue. So let's talk about it a little bit. When we think about hypertension, remember the first step. We talked about it briefly last night, and I recognize that some of us here tonight, you're some new faces, welcome. But that means that you did not learn a very important principle we learned last night. Whenever a disease becomes a reality in an individual's life, we must follow some steps. And just to imagine, the Bible actually helps us understand the step. Notice what the first step should be. Whenever a disease is real in your life and in my life, there's a first step. And here's the first step. Number one, we need to understand what is the cause. We need to understand what is the cause. Why? Because we learned last night that there's a beautiful principle found in the book of Proverbs, one of the wisdom books of the Bible. And that Proverbs in chapter 26 and verse 2, it says, the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, a curse never comes without a cause. Now, here's the second principle. Curse never comes without a cause. Therefore, the next thing we learned is the cause which I know not, what should we do? Search it out. Search it out. That was Job 29 and verse 16. So the first thing we need to understand is that anytime there is a disease, don't just deal with it from its symptomatic standpoint. That's how a lot of people do it. When we get a disease, we see a lot of symptoms. A lot of those symptoms, we take certain medications to calm down those symptoms. It's kind of like when we cough. Somebody has a cough and they keep coughing. What we want to do is we want to get rid of the symptom, but not the problem. You see, a cough comes because something was happening. Maybe there's a lot of congestion in the chest. Maybe there's a lot of phlegm buildup. Maybe there's different things happening. But if all we do is just say, I keep coughing, I need a cough medicine, then we go ahead and we take the cough medicine and it's going to shut us up. It's going to definitely stop the body from coughing, but it's not addressing the cause. And what that means is that while we have a bit of temporary relief, we did not get rid of the problem, and chances are that problem's going to come back, and sometimes with a deep vengeance. And so it is that what God teaches is when you have a problem, when you have a curse, God says don't just address the symptom, Ascertain the cause. It's not enough that I'm coughing, but why am I coughing? It's not enough that I have a nosebleed, but why do I have a nosebleed? It's not enough that I have a headache, but why do I have a headache? It's not enough that I have a tumor growth. Why do I have the tumor growth? It's not enough that my pressure's up. Why is my pressure up? That's the concept. I don't know about you, but that's almost super simple, isn't it? That makes sense. That's actually simple. And I like simple. Life is complex as it is already, and life does not need my help to make it more complex. I believe that life is going to be complex just because it is what it is. So what we need simplification. We need things to be simple. And so it is that whenever we're stricken with a disease, the first step is ascertain the cause. And if you don't know the cause, what should you do? Search it out. Now, remember that the word curse is here. And somebody says, I thought we're talking about disease. Why are you talking about curses? When we think of curses, we think of witchcraft. We think of somebody with some doll that looks like us and they're blowing on it or dropping sprinklings on it or doing something crazy. But that's not the limitation to a curse. The Bible actually uses the word curse, but again, it refers to disease. Now, we saw it last night, but for those of you who didn't, we went through this. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, it's the chapter of blessings and curses. Verses 1 to 14 are blessings. Verses 15 and onward are curses. These are all the things in the verses that the Bible calls curses. But correct me if I'm wrong, some of these things the Bible called curses are diseases. Do you see that? I mean, think about it. When you think of a fever, we don't call a fever a curse today. We call that a disease. But the Bible called it a curse. So therefore, there's an interchangeable language in Scripture that sometimes the word curse will be used, but it's actually referring to a disease. Therefore, we must understand that the same way a curse never comes without a cause, we have every inspired biblical right to say a disease never comes without a cause. And when you don't know the cause of your disease, what should we do? Search it out. You get that? That allows you and I to be intelligent. That's how you start taking charge of your health. And so it is that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, remember, I showed you how did they come to these conclusions that fevers represent chills and shivering fits, how the botch represents chicken pox and hives, how emerods represents tumors, hemorrhoids, and cancer. How do we come to that conclusion? You'll remember that through this picture here, this is a picture of a little boy who was a mummy. They mummified him, he died. And when they did that, blood vessels are very well preserved in mummies. So even though they're laying in a tomb for even over 1,000 years or more, their blood vessels are very well preserved. So the medical scientists to date, all they simply do is they extract the blood vessels from the fluid that's commingled with, their embalming in their tombs. And hence they discover, wow, look at that. There were cardiovascular diseases and all these other things that the people of Egypt were suffering with. Now, the reason why that's important to us is because there's a promise. And there's a powerful promise. It's hard for people to believe it, but it's true anyhow. The promise is found in the book of Exodus chapter 15 and verse 26. God said, if you do what I say, if you follow my commands, if you give ear to my words, if you keep all of my statutes, God says, I will put none of the diseases upon you which I allowed to fall upon the Egyptians. So when I discovered that the Egyptians suffered with a lot of these vascular diseases, that means that if I do what God says, I have an additional protective barrier from the vascular diseases that even the people of Egypt suffered with. I was looking at an article and I found this to be absolutely exciting. Look at this. Ancient mummies prove heart disease is as old as we are. Look at the date. You see that date? That's just last year. Now watch this. I said, man, this article is pretty incredible. Now look at what it says. A paper published earlier today in Global Heart reported that atherosclerosis is surprisingly easy to find in the remains of ancient humans from Egypt, Peru, the Aleutian Islands, North America, East Asia, and Europe. Researchers reviewed computer tomographic, better known as CT scans, of the mummies to detect calcification in the arteries. If you were watching that video when we were showing what high blood pressure is, you remember you saw the artery? And you remember you saw that yellow stuff that just started building up in the artery that was blocking the blood and not allowing it to go through smoothly? That was called calcification. So in other words, when you see this calcification, arterial plaque being built up, that's one of the great causes of what ultimately leads to hypertension, which can also lead to even a heart attack. Well, here it is that now they're discovering in medical science, they're saying, man, when we study the mummies, we discovered that they went through calcification in the arteries. So here goes God saying, listen, that means that the ancient Egyptians actually suffered with hypertension. And here goes God saying, if you do what I tell you to do, you will never have that thing in your life. Now watch this. It goes on to tell us the fact that it's so easy to find these calcifications, these residues and sediments in ancient people is surprising, said study co-author Dr. Randall Thompson, an associate professor of medicine at the University of Missouri School of Medicine in Kansas City and a cardiologist and researcher at the St. Luke's Mid-American Heart Institute. It was surprising to us and a lot of people. It's amazing what God allows to be preserved in our world today so that when people start to think that they are wiser than him, he continually confounds the so-called wisdom, even with things that sometimes people call foolishness. So here it is that we look at these realities. We see that hypertension is something even the ancient Egyptians suffered with, and it is a disease that obviously is plaguing our people today. I wonder if there are some principles that can really help us that we can overcome these things. So let's continue. When we go a little bit further, one of the first things we need to start looking at is heredity. A lot of times people will talk about heredity. Look, my mother had it, my mother's mother had it, and my mother's mother's mother had it, so I'm going to have it. And there's a lot of people that think like that. And what we need to understand is there's partial truth to that. And I'm so happy to tell you this tonight because there's a lot of people that say, hey, if my parents had it, and my parents' parents had it, there's a good chance I'm going to have it too. And you know what a lot of people do with that rationale? They stop trying to work against it. They feel, let's just let nature run its course. I can't avoid it. Now, I am here to tell you as living proof that that is not true. On my mother's side, cancer. My mother died of cancer. My aunt Baricia, she died of cancer. My aunt Norma, she died of cancer. Cancer runs rampant through my mother's side. On my father's side, high blood pressure and diabetes type 2 all day long. Him, his brothers, and everybody else. Now here I am beating the statistics. I stand before you 43 years young. Amen. 43 years young, black man. And here it is that I've beaten the statistics because I am supposed to, at this age, if my parents had ABC diseases, I'm supposed to have it according to the various statistics in our world today, just by the law of heredity. But there's a marked difference as to why is it that I don't have it, where when I look back at my parents and I look at their lifestyles, they had it. And what I've discovered is this. If you do what your parents did, you'll get what your parents had. Is that simple enough? If you eat the way mama ate, if you drink the way daddy drank, if you sleep the way mama slept, and if you play the way daddy played, if you and I continue to do what our parents did, then it's a no-brainer you're going to get what your parents had. And guess what? Did you know even the Bible teaches that? Look at this. I want you to think about it. Some say it's heredity. Now, the question is this really true? Let's take a look at it. So if you were to just watch a few of these verses here, just look at what Scripture says and think about it, okay? Watch this. So number one, it says, thou shalt not bow down. In other words, when God told Israel, do not make any graven images. Don't worship them. Look at what he says here. He says, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of who? The fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that. So notice, what did the third and fourth generation all have in common? They all hated God. So notice, this was the line of commonality between the generations past and the generations future, all the way up to the third and fourth. One generation hated God, then the next generation, they learned to hate God, then the next generation, they learned to hate God, and even up to the fourth generation, they learned to hate God. So therefore, what do they all have in common? Their iniquities are going to be visited. But notice how the generational curse is broken. It continues by saying this. And showing what? Mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Do you see how the generational curse was broken? You see, the third and fourth generations did what the previous generation did, so therefore they got what the previous generation got. But the way that the generational curse, the way the cycle was broken, was that mercy began to come to another generation. And the reason why, because instead of hating God, they loved him. Instead of disobeying God, they kept his commandments. Do you see that? It's the same principle. You see, the day that I learned how to eat right, in my home growing up, we ate anything that could move. If you can move, you was in trouble. Because if we find it, we get our hands on it, we're going to try it out. You understand that? That's how we grew up. We were very ignorant people in our home. We just ate based off of taste. That was it. It didn't matter if it had high fructose corn syrup. It didn't matter if it would damage your white blood cells, damage your kidney. We weren't even thinking about that. All we wanted to do was eat. We lived to eat rather than eat to live. That was how we lived. We lived to eat. It was all about eating. It didn't matter what time. It could be midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'll just get up, I just feel like some sandwiches. And we just go downstairs and we just go ahead and whip up some sandwiches and just start having big old meals when my body's supposed to be resting. Didn't care. So we were following that path and that pattern. And it was only until I came to the age of 20. That's when I started learning, oh, you mean there's more vegetables in the world than just iceberg lettuce? That's all we ate, iceberg lettuce. Used to get these little sugar quarter waters. You pay a quarter and you get these little waters that was blue, red, green, and it was loaded with sugar and dyes, all sorts of additives and everything. And I would just drink those things up, and I called that hydration. But drinking water, come on, man, water was the enemy. It's like we didn't drink water. So in other words, when I became 20 years old and I started to learn about eating to live, I started learning the importance of exercise, learning the importance of proper rest, learning all of these things. Most importantly, learning to put my hands and my life in the hands of God and let him manage my stress. It was when I learned these things, man, life became more peaceful. Health started coming through the roof. I'm starting to feel great, starting to feel loaded with energy. Everything was just going fantastic. And so it is that now, 23 years later, living and growing in this lifestyle, man, I have the privilege of now educating individuals in the name of lifestyle, helping them say, look, you can have a better life. You don't have to always live off of drugs, medication, and filled with all these diseases and believe the doom and gloom that often you're told. You're sick, there's no cure, and you will die eventually from this disease. So all we're going to do is just make you comfortable in the interim. There's a better story than that. There's a much better story than that. And that's the story that I want to share with you tonight. So please don't allow your minds to fall into this trap that says, oh, my parents had it, my parents' parent had it, I am going to have it. Always remember, heredity is like a gun. Is a gun dangerous? When a gun is just sitting on a table, it's not dangerous. A gun is dangerous when somebody picks it up and pulls the trigger. So always remember, heredity is like a gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger. So whatever lifestyle you live, that's what's going to have that determining factor. That's what's going to make that marked difference. You understand that? So yes, heredity is an issue, but just remember, heredity is just like a gun. A gun is harmless as long as it sits on the table. But it's when we pull the trigger, that's when a gun is dangerous. The pulling of the trigger, in yours and my case, is when we choose a wrong or a detrimental lifestyle. So let's continue. So the next thing is this, then we need to understand what is the causes. What are the causes when it comes to hypertension? Well, the first thing we want to do is qualify hypertension a little bit more. When we think about what is the cause, the first thing we want to consider is something called primary essential hypertension. What that is this type of high blood pressure called primary essential hypertension tends to develop gradually over many years. A person's not hypertensive just because they got, if you get scared, your heart's going to beat a little bit faster, and you might have a moment of vasoconstriction, and therefore you may have a bit of elevated blood pressure. Well, that doesn't mean that that's a diagnosis of high blood pressure. So what we're looking at is when your high blood pressure, when your markers are again over that 120 over 80, and let's say it's going for more than 48 hours. Once you see that the numbers are consistent or getting higher and it's been over 48 hours and we still see that thing going up, that's when we want to go ahead and say, all right, I think we need to address this. So that's how we're going to measure it. So one of the things you'll see here is that when you think of primary hypertension, it gradually grows over many years. But then there's something also called secondary hypertension. When you think of secondary hypertension, some people have high blood pressure caused by an underlying condition. This type of high blood pressure, called secondary hypertension, tends to appear suddenly and cause higher blood pressure than does primary hypertension. Various conditions and medications can lead to secondary hypertension. So what are some examples of conditions or medications that can lead to secondary hypertension when there's a quick spike, there's a sudden hit, and the blood pressure starts to rise? Well, number one, you can think of things like obstructive sleep apnea. Also, kidney problems. Also, adrenal gland tumors. Also, thyroid problems. Then, certain defects in blood vessels you're born with, things that are congenital. Certain medications such as birth control pills, cold remedies, decongestants, over-the-counter pain relievers, and some prescription drugs. All of these things can spike your blood pressure up real quick and cause secondary hypertension. Then, illegal drugs such as cocaine and amphetamines. These are things that can, cause that spike very quickly. It's different. So these are the things that you would call your secondary hypertension. Alcohol abuse and chronic alcohol use definitely will do it. Definitely will do it. And this is why we caution individuals who want to overcome hypertension. We're going to have to pull back from the alcohol consumption. We're going to have to pull back from the smoking of the cigarettes. They cause a constriction in those vessels. So these are things you want to watch out for. Now, again, when you think about the cause, I'm so happy that though, they're not here personally, but I have some medical books of some people that were medical professionals that decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a look at disease from a lifestyle standpoint. One of these books is called Health Power. Health Power is a really good layman's book on being able to understand various diseases, its causes, methods of prevention, and also cure. And when you look at the book Health Power, it actually goes into some of the things that can cause hypertension. And it has a lot of highlights. Well, I'm going to read a couple of things to you here very quickly. Number one, it says, how can I know if I have hypertension? It says hypertension is defined as systolic blood pressure, reading the top number, consistently over 130, and or a diastolic or lower number, reading of 85 or above. So once you're at that 130, 85 above, hypertension. Then it says the optimum level is now below 120 over 80. Even though high blood pressure has no symptoms, that's why it's called a silent disease, it can cause progressive changes in the blood vessels until the first sign hits, usually a stroke or a heart attack. Now, I will go ahead and, if any of you want to take a peek at this, you can afterwards. But when you look at this, what are some things that the book highlights that are causes for hypertension? Number one, you have things like that. We just read it, Health Power, page 40. Obesity. Obesity is definitely an issue when you're thinking about hypertension. If an individual is overweight, that also can contribute to vasoconstriction. Then laziness, lack of exercise. Yeah, I like that picture right here. This is what a lot of people look like when they don't exercise. That's usually their exercise. They exercise the thumb. Got fat thumbs and skinny bodies. But here it is. That's another reality. Is a lot of times people don't exercise. They just simply exercise the thumb on the couch. Another one, of course, is, again, different types of arterial plaque that can build up, calcification. That's also. And then the obvious one, sodium. Sodium, too much salt. Now, the question is this. How many of you have at least heard at some point in your life that high sodium intake is a cause for hypertension? How many of you have at least heard that at some point in your life, right? Okay, now, here's the thing. How much salt is too much salt? How much sodium is too much sodium? This has been the constant problem that we've run into. You can't tell somebody too much sodium is the reason for hypertension, but then you don't explain too much because everybody's different. Some people say, look, I only give it about 10 shakes a day. That's enough. So some people think 10 shakes a day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 per arm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get it? So everybody has different ways that they go about how much sodium is too much sodium. So we can't leave it into the hands of the common individual. We can't leave it up to them that they must figure it out. We, as the health educators, we must figure it out. So what I did here is, I began to look, and I started to look at, number one, my health book here, Health Power, and then I looked at another one of my very favorite health books. This book right here is called The Encyclopedia of Foods and Their Medicinal Power. So I like this because this is a book that's been put together by medical professionals where all they did was they studied food. And they said, let's look at all the components of food and let's find out the good, the bad, and the ugly. What foods is it that can cause diseases? What foods is it that an individual can eat that by the grace of God, the disease can be reversed? So as I began to look at this, they had a section in here on sodium, and it talked about how much sodium should be put together. So I want to show you. When we look at salt, of course, again, the question is how much salt is too much salt, right? So now let's think about it. When you look at these examples here, the first thing I want to help you understand is that every food group we eat, when you think about the things that naturally grow from the earth, they already come with a content of sodium. They already have a sodium content. There's already a level of sodium in it. So the question we're asking is how much additional salt needs to be added, all right? Because every food group already has a level of sodium. Our question is how much additional? So let's look at it. Number one, in Health Power, page 126, this is what it says. It says an average of about 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams, which is 1/5 of a teaspoon of salt, is all the added salt we need to put to a recipe. Added salt. Continuing, when you look at the other book here, this is the Encyclopedia of Foods, Volume 1, page 346. It says approximately half a teaspoon of salt a day, 1.25 grams, covers the need for sodium of an adult at approximately 200 pounds with a sedentary lifestyle. That's how much added salt we need. You see, the problem with us is this. This is the way average Westerners cook. Here we go. We say, all right, it's time to cook. So we go ahead and we get our vegetables, whatever it is we're going to cook, and we go ahead and put it on the stove. Typically, we will put something in a pot, and then we'll fill it up with water, and then we'll go ahead and let the water work to a boil, obviously, on the stove. So what happens is, when that water is working up and boiling up that food group, then when the food is ready, a lot of times, I'm not saying this is what you do, but this is what a lot of people do in Western culture and Western society. They will go ahead and take that pot when the vegetables are well cooked, and they will go ahead and take a trip somewhere. Where do you think they're going? They're going to the sink. And when they go to the sink, what they do is they will pour out the water and let it go down the drain. Now, here's the problem. If you take water, heat, and friction on vegetables. Vegetables are typically very tender. And when you take water, heat, and friction is when the water starts boiling. What's happening is it's shaking and shaking and shaking all of those vegetables inside that pot. And it begins to have a stripping effect. It begins to strip some of the nutrients from the vegetable. So what happens is when the pot is finished and we go to the sink and we pour down the water, a lot of the nutrients that was in the vegetables goes down the drain as well. So now we're left with this vegetable that's pretty bland. So what do we have to do? We're going to have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. You get it? We're going to have to go ahead and start seasoning that thing, and we will typically put far more than was necessary. That comes because we don't know how to do proper food preparation. This is why on Sunday, we are going to have a cooking class. Sunday, you're actually going to taste a lot of food, and you're going to get to eat it, and we are going to get to enjoy it. And you're going to find that you're going to eat pastries, but it's not going to have the eggs, the milk, and the butter, and the white sugars like a lot of pastries have. You're going to have things that taste like meat, but it's not meat. You're going to have cheeses, but it's not cheese. We're going to show you how to make all these things from scratch and how they're not just healthy, but they taste good. I want to say something right now. I am not a believer in eating a lot of food that's healthy but tastes terrible. I believe that God gave us taste buds for a reason. And it's not so we can go, ugh. It's so that we can go, mmm. You get that? I mean, that's simple. So when God gave us these taste buds, they're there for a reason. So the goal is to make food that is not only healthy and like medicine to the body, but it also tastes fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how you don't have to violate these principles. You don't have to keep adding all of this additional salt that is not necessary. Now, of course, somebody says, well, if I'm only going to use that much salt, there's no way that my food can taste good. Not so, because even though you use a little bit of salt, you can use a lot more of these. You see, all you do is you replace it with your herbal seasonings. The more that you use your herbal seasonings, the less you'll need actual sodium. So these are the things that you want to consider. This is why it just requires a bit of intelligence as it relates to how we prepare our food. That's all it is. So the more that we learn how to prepare our food with different types and proper seasonings, the more we learn how to do that, the more we start cooperating with principles of health and not adding so much excess sodium, you will find that your blood pressure can become very regulated quite quickly. So that's point number one. So now we understand some of these causes of hypertension. Again, lack of exercise. Again, too much salt. Again, a lot of times, obesity. Alcohol consumption. There are many things, but what we're going to do now is we're going to consider some next points. What else can we do when we are stricken with hypertension? Based on the picture, it would be obvious. I'd like to encourage you to start praying more about your diseases. Somebody says, are you kidding me? Pray about my disease. That don't even make sense. Well, guess what? It's starting to make sense even to the world of science. Let me show you. Here's what medical science is actually finding out. They actually are stating scientific evidence. I want you to think about it. People who are atheists, people who say there is no God, people who are looking and saying, give me a break, there's no God in the world, this is nonsense. But these individuals are discovering some irrefutable facts. One of them is this. Notice what they discovered. Look at the date. Just this year, science proves the healing power of prayer. Notice what they stated here. Studies have shown prayer can prevent people from getting sick. And when they do get sick, prayer can help them get better faster. Duke University's Harold G. Koenig, MD, states. Look at what he said. An exhaustive analysis of more than 1,500 reputable medical studies indicates people who are more religious and pray more have better mental and physical health. And out of 125 studies that looked at the link between health and regular worship, 85 showed regular churchgoers live longer. So they're actually finding like, oh my word, look at this. They're saying there's a correlation. Now, the reason why is because it's very simple. There's a statement that was said a long time ago that you and I would do well to study it out a little bit more. You see, they said, listen, the more that people pray, and the more that people attend church is the more, or a religious institution of some kind, they found that the more that people are starting to see high blood pressure get regulated and get regulated and get regulated. Well, here's what else they discovered, that God was right all along. The Bible says in Proverbs 17 and verse 22, a merry heart does good like a medicine. And so it is, there's a lot of truth to this. It took me a long time to find this image. You see how the heart's inside of the pill? That's pretty good. Now, there was something I began to study. When you think about anatomy and physiology, there is something called endothelial function. And the more that you study the endothelial function, the endothelial cells, you begin to see that there's something called happy cells. That the more an individual is mirthful, the more that an individual is joyful, the more that an individual is positive and maintains a positive outlook on life. They are not those negative people that no matter how much you try to keep them inspired, they always have a way of just going back into negative conversation. You know people like that? No matter how much you say, you know, it's a beautiful day today. Yeah, well, you better enjoy it because it's our last. It's like, can you stay positive, please? You get that? I mean, it's like no matter what, there's always something they can say or find to just take it back down, to just remove the joy and to be just a bunch of, gloomy people. But the more that the heart is merry, it actually produces it. I challenge you, go on the internet tonight and go online. Go ahead and look up endothelial, endothelial, endothelial function. And you'll actually see that this is medical science. They're actually saying that we all have something called endothelial function. The more happy, the more mirthful, the more positive, the more better outlooks we have on life, etc. It says it actually has a chemical reaction in the body that causes individuals to begin to feel better, and the body correlates with the way the mind is thinking, and as a result of that, white blood cells, immune system gets boosted, and a lot of these bad problems that we suffer with can go away. So there's a lot of connection to a merry heart really does good, like a medicine, even medical science. So the first thing I want to recommend is that after you ascertain the cause, start praying about your situation. Start looking to God and asking, Lord, you know what? Help me not to look at this in a negative way, but in a positive way. Help me not to think of the doom and gloom, but the possibilities and the probabilities. Stay focused. I remember a friend of mine, his wife was diagnosed with cancer. And when she was diagnosed with cancer, the doctor told the wife, you are stricken with cancer, you have stage 2. And the doctor began to tell her about the cancer. And I remember that she was just kind of a blank stare, and she's just, non-responsive to the doctor nor to her husband. Eventually, the doctor and the husband became a little uncomfortable and started to say, are you okay? And her answer was, I'm fine. She says, I'm choosing my attitude. You and I must understand that that plays a massive role in healing. It's what kind of attitude you carry. And how much the more when we're not developing an inward positive attitude. In other words, I'm just looking to myself and how I can overcome it, because there's very little we can do. But I am thankful that we can look unto God and we can look unto what He can do on our behalf. That's where the greater joy comes from for those who believe and those who understand. And so it is that when we look at this, there is much truth to the idea that a merry heart literally, not just spiritually, but literally does good, even like a medicine. Well, continuing, medication, we got to talk about it. I mean, when you think about drug medication is, number one, something that is man-made. It's something produced by man. Sometimes they mix botanicals with it, but it's usually a mixture of the synthetic with the natural. The synthetics, unfortunately, typically overpower the natural. And a lot of times when you look at the drug medications in our world today, there are cases where drug medication may very well be needed. When I think of trauma, certain emergencies, sure, drug medication may be needed. When I think of things like hypertension, however, Western debilitating lifestyle diseases, when I think about these type of things, it is possible that we may be able to overcome these things without even needing to take a single drug. Then, to add more insult to injury, a lot of times the drug medications are complicating the issue rather than helping the issue. And that's a major, major issue right there. I want you to listen to this. I was reading in the book Health Power here. They have a section on drug medication. It's on page 80. And when I was reading about it, I found it to be very startling. And I want you to listen to this because it especially talks about hypertension. And listen to what it says here. It says, in the medical world, new and more effective wonder drugs are being discovered and introduced almost daily, while older ones are improved and refined. Now, it says, yet the perfect drug still eludes us, the one that will do its job with absolutely no deleterious side effects. That thing is still to be found. Now it goes on to say, consider blood pressure drugs. I thought it was interesting they highlighted blood pressure drugs. It says, consider blood pressure drugs. They are the most widely used prescription medications on the market and among the more effective ones. Yet they carry a host of side effects. These can include weakness, fatigue, drowsiness, headache, mental depression, dizziness, bloating, sweating, indigestion, unstable emotional states, slurred speech, raised cholesterol levels, and impotence. I remember a gentleman, he came to me, he said, Dwayne, I'm a married man and I am going through impotence and I need to know what's going on and, how can you help me? And I said, well, let's talk about it. And I began to talk to him because he was going through renal failure. His kidneys were failing. And as we began to talk, I looked at the medications he was taking because I saw no connection between renal failure and impotence. But then when I began to look at the medications, 3 of the 5 medications, the top side effect was impotence. So a lot of times, the challenges that a lot of people are suffering with is not because of the disease, but it's because of the complications connected to the medications they're taking with the disease or for the disease. So while it's helping them on one side, it's just hurting them on the other. That's not God's healing program. I'm sorry. There's a better way, and I am thankful for that. And so it is that one day I remember I was looking through inspiration, and I noticed this point right here. I just read from you, Health Power, page 80. But then I want you to look at this. This is a verse from Scripture that I thought was very interesting. The children of Israel were living in disobedience to God. Yet, you're about to see, they still wanted something great to happen. Let's notice. It says, for this is the day of the Lord God of hosts, a day of vengeance, that he may avenge him of his adversaries. And the sword shall devour, and it shall be satiate and made drunk with their blood. For the Lord God of hosts hath a sacrifice in the north country by the river Euphrates. Go up into Gilead and take balm, O virgin, the daughter of Egypt. In vain shalt thou use many medicines, for thou shalt not be cured. And this was the problem, is that Israel, they wanted the benefits without the benefactor, without, being the true benefactor of the one who gave it. They wanted to go ahead and get all the blessings of God, but they didn't want to follow God. It's kind of like certain modern Christian religions. A lot of people like Jesus to be a savior, just don't start trying to be my Lord. You see a lot of Christianities like that today, where a lot of people, they love the fact that Jesus will save them from sin, but they don't want Jesus to be a Lord and start telling them what to do and how to live. That's a problem. God says, listen, in my relationship with my people, it's all or nothing. You got to do what I say, understanding that God cares about us and he wants the best for us, and he will never withhold anything good from us. I'm the father of 4 children, and I remember a time when my children saw something nice and shiny and it looks like a nice play toy. It was a knife. And I remember that when they had that knife, if I love my child, you see, there's some people today that believe even when somebody plays with something dangerous, we should just go ahead and let them play with it. If they die, they die. That's their choice. I'm so glad I don't have a heavenly father like that. God loves me enough that he realizes the same thing I realized. When I came to my children and I said, hey, let me get that. You know what the child did? They did that. But it was just like, hey, let that go. And we had to take it out of the hand. And what do you think that child did? And start crying and making all these strange faces. But did I take it from the child because I hated him or loved him? You see, I loved him. You see, true love does not always let people do any and everything they want to do, like some perverted religious positions teach today. True love is loving people enough to say, I can't let you do that. That's dangerous. That's going to hurt you. And therefore, if you want that, I will not have any part in making that a reality for you. That's an example of true love. And so it is that the people of Israel, they wanted all the blessings of heaven, but they did not want the one in heaven. So therefore God says, all right, so even when you take your medicines, it will be in vain, because you shall not be cured. Why? Because cure only comes from one direction. You got to look up. Manage your disease, or you can look left, right, behind you, and in front of you. Cure your disease, you got to look up. That's the only direction for cure. And so it is that when I think about that, it is no wonder that this video is a reality. Take a look at this.
Keeping your blood pressure at a normal level is a must to maintain good health. However, certain medical conditions as well as age make this quite difficult to achieve. Though there are many medications in the market that seek to aid people who are suffering from hypertension, most of them are known to cause unwanted side effects. Micardis, one of the most popular high blood pressure medications, has caused back pain, diarrhea, dizziness, sinus pain, sinus congestion, sore throat, and upper respiratory tract infections to thousands of people worldwide. Norvasc, another famous brand name in the field of hypertension drugs, also causes dizziness, drowsiness, fatigue, flushing, headaches, muscle cramps, nausea, stomach pain, and inexplicable weakness. The same is true for Capoten, one of the leading brands in the market. Aside from coughs and dizziness, Capoten has been reported to cause taste changes amongst its users. These side effects are caused by the synthetic materials found in these high blood pressure drugs.
Who wants that? In other words, if there was an option, now if there's no option, then you work with what's available. But if there was an option, then the question is it possible that I can overcome my ailment without having to go through all of these battles, this up and down, where 1 minute I'm feeling better, but now I'm dizzy. I'm feeling better, but now I got back pain. I'm feeling better, but now my speech is slurred. Is there a possibility that there's a better way without all of these side effects and all these complications that are happening? And the answer is yes. And so it is that one of the first areas we're going to look at is food. You see, one of the things I like, I thought this was absolutely ingenious. What they did here is, I wish so much that you could see this up close, and I know I'm a bit, at a distance, but just try to do the best you can. When I looked at the foods book, what happened here is that they have an arrow that points up. And what the medical practitioners found is that the more that you and I consume certain food groups, it actually can have an effect upon the body that works just like medicine. So therefore, they have an arrow here where the doctors, what they said is, if you increase these food groups, this will help combat and help regulate your blood pressure. But then what they also did is they said, but this right here, the pink line, they said these are the things you need to eliminate. These are the things you need to go ahead and reduce or eliminate, because these are the things that's actually causing high blood pressure. So I began to look at this a little bit, and I said, let me put some of this on the screen for you all. So what we're going to do now is let's talk about it. What are some of the food groups that actually contribute to hypertension? Now, when I began to look at this part, I must confess this was a mass eye-opener at a certain stage in my life. Today, it makes absolute common sense. But back in the days when I first looked at it, I must confess I was a bit shocked. What are some of the food groups that are directly connected to the elevation of blood pressure? And I want those of you, especially who have hypertension, you want to give your undivided attention to what you're about to see on the screen. What are some of the foods that contribute to it? Number one, coffee. Coffee? Coffee. Then when I began to look at this thing, I'm saying, coffee. Then as I looked at it, and again, this book will be here, black and white pepper. You know people who love to eat spicy foods? Spicy foods are a major vasoconstrictor. Black and white pepper. Then not just that, but also matured cheeses. Matured cheeses. You know, it's always this, I always find this to be the interesting part of the presentation, because you always hear, wow, ooh, yeah. A lot of times people don't study these things out. They don't look at the foods. We just eat it because we know it tastes good. We eat it because we used to eat it growing up, and we eat it because we like it. But a lot of times we don't pay attention to what is this stuff doing to me as it relates to my blood vessels and my blood pressure. And again, if you want to see all the rationales, I have it here. So that way, you know, if you want to, you can go ahead and take a look at it. So it'll all be here. I'll leave it resting on the table if you want to take a peek. But nevertheless, you'll see it. It kind of goes through the food groups point by point and gives you lots of nice in-depth information. Now, in addition to that is also meat. Your various meats, especially your red meat, but your various meats. Sometimes, you ask people, do you eat meat? No, I don't eat meat. And then you'll see them eating chicken. It's like, that's meat. So a lot of times flesh, let me say flesh. We understand flesh better than meat. Then also soft drinks. Soft drinks are a massive contributor. Also, soft drinks is one of the top food groups that a person can take that can contribute to esophageal cancer. When you drink a lot of these sodas and these type of things. And then also eggs, especially with the yolk. So when I began to look at this, the reality is this, and I've sat down with hundreds of individuals now pretty much throughout the world, and a lot of times when they have hypertension, you'll talk to them. Do you eat this? Do you eat this? Do you eat this? Do you eat this? Yes, I do. And then you say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of scale you back on these things a little bit. We're going to start pulling you back. And then as we start pulling them back and start regulating the diet, taking out the bad, bringing in the good, we start seeing blood pressure getting regulated, not slowly, but very quickly. So these become very, very positive things for us to start looking into. Number one, all of these things at some point or another have a different level of high sodium content. So obviously that in and of itself is going to become a problem. They also cause a nervousness, like caffeine. When you think about individuals who are stressed, can stress cause hypertension? Yes, it can. Well, some of the nerve disorders that can come from high coffee intake, what do you think that that's going to do to the body? That's obviously affecting the nervous system. And it's negatively impacting it. Coffee is one of the most amazing, legal, highly popular drugs that a lot of people are drinking today. And so it is that the more that we begin to look at these things for what they are, I was so amazed yet disgusted how MSN had an article that tried to make it sound like coffee was healthy. I said, now how pathetic is that? I mean, is Starbucks going out of business? You guys, how much did they pay them to put that article out? I was just like, are you kidding me? That's for the ignorant. That's not for the intelligent. There's no way that we can look at coffee as something good for you. We understand people take it because they got issues and they can't stay awake because maybe there's intemperance or other things going on, and therefore they got to boost themselves up some way, somehow. I understand that. We can work through that. But coffee is good for you? I think not. And so it is that the more that we begin to look at these things, This is where we start receiving an education that says, you know what, I need to start rethinking this, because this is for those who really say, I want hypertension out of my life. I don't want to be hypertensive anymore. I don't want high blood pressure. Well, if you don't want it, then you're going to need to start scaling back, ultimately to the point of elimination, if possible. And it is possible. Now, of course, what are some foods that can help us? You know, one of the things that a lot of hypertensive patients take is something called diuretics. Diuretics. They put a lot more water in the system, because what happens is when you get excess sodium in the system, it gets retained in the tissues and causes swelling. And when the tissues begin to swell, it presses against the vessels, and hence you have your high blood pressure, because the vessels are being squeezed. So a lot of times what we need to do is we need to flush out that excess sodium. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of times people will take the diuretics. Well, God has natural diuretics. They're called fruits and vegetables. You know, eureka. Can you imagine that? Fruits and vegetables, raw. You know, eating a lot more raw fruit, a lot more raw vegetables. The average individual doesn't even know how much to eat. If you and I were to eat a fruit, as an example, if you take a banana, when you hold a banana like this in the center. And when you hold the banana in the center, if there's still banana coming out on each side of the hand, then that typically is going to equate to 2 servings of fruit. You have an apple, you can go ahead and hold the apple in the center of the hand, and then the apple can fill in the center. That's typically going to be 2 servings of fruit. When you think about a mango, how many of you like mangoes? Look at your hands. Look at you. You look like a football game. Hands just went up. I have been cursed. I can't eat mangoes. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'll tell you all about it another time. Nevertheless, mangoes, when you think about the mangoes, I'm not talking about the Filipino mangoes. Those are kind of small. But we're talking more so the other mangoes, you know, Australian, some of the mangoes that grow even in the U.S. When you think of those large mangoes, that's equivalent to 2 servings. So if I say to you, the average adult needs to have 5 to 9 servings of fruit per day. You may say, 5 to 9 servings, that's a lot of fruit. What else am I going to eat? But think about it. 1 large apple, 2 servings. 1 large banana, 2 servings. Handful of grapes, 1 serving. That's 5 servings of fruit. You see how simple that is? So if you were to have 5 servings of raw food, fresh fruit per day, and half a plate minimum of raw salad, having yourself a good salad, put some sprouts, put some shredded carrot on it, and so on, at least half a plate's worth. These are ways that you start giving your body, and I'm talking about daily doing this. These are ways that we can start giving our bodies the level of not only nutrition, but even the diuretic effect of these raw vegetables and raw fruits can now have a positive impact on our bodies. So these are things that you and I can do. So number 1, if you really want to combat your hypertension just from the food side, you want to make sure that you're seriously increasing your fruits and your vegetables in their what state? Raw. Very good. Then you also want to make sure you get your beans in there. One of the big issues in hypertension is also low potassium. Your bean group, which there are so many, your bean group, that's where you're going to get a good amount of potassium from. So therefore, you want to make sure that you do all that you can to try to find out what are the beans that work best with my body. We understand that not all beans work best. We know a lot of people start passing gas and all these things. There's ways to get around that. We'll talk about that at the cooking class. But the key is, if you and I go ahead and start having a more legume intake, that's going to also help to combat hypertension. Then whole grains. Whole grains. Stay away from this thing called enriched. Enriched is deceptive. When you think of enriched grains, I used to think enriched means, ooh, it's enriched. It has even more than the normal amount. Well, that's not true. If you study the milling process, a grain has 3 things. A whole grain always has 3 things. Germ, endosperm, bran. Always has those 3 things. Germ, endosperm, bran. So let's say somebody likes to eat a lot of white rice. If you like to eat a lot of white rice, that's a problem. And let me tell you why. Because when you have white rice, that's typically a stripped grain. When you have white rice, you have no bran and you have no germ. All it is endosperm. So all you're getting is just part of the benefit of the grain. So that's why a lot of people eat white rice and white bread and all these type of things. One of the key signs you'll always see is they get constipated. Eating 3-4 meals a day and having 1 bowel movement a day. That doesn't even mathematically make sense. If you have 3 meals a day, 3 times 7 is 21. If you have 1 bowel movement a day, 1 times 7 is 7. Question, where's the other 14 meals? You understand that? It's still in your gut. It's still in your colon. And this is how we start to go through a lot of these problems that people go through with constipation and all these things. And a lot of times that can happen if we're eating a lot of these stripped grains. So generally, when you think of a whole grain, it has up to 24 vitamins and minerals in it. What the milling companies do is they strip it of its vitamins and minerals, and they only put back 4 or 5 and have the nerve to call it enriched wheat. That's the enriched wheat that you get when you buy that bread and it says enriched wheat. That's the enriched whatever when you buy it. That's what's happening. So what we want to do is we want to get more whole grains. Eat it the way God made it. Now, what else can you do? Exercise, for sure. If you are hypertensive, you want to try to get yourself a good hour of exercise per day. If you can't do an hour, at least get a good solid 30 minutes. And you can do it with walking. Walking is a phenomenal way to exercise. That's why I put the picture there. Just understand walking is different from strolling. This is not getting exercise when you do this. You know, this is our society today, big time. You know, so that's not exercising. When you're exercising, you're walking, you are going to, you're walking. That's exercise. You're walking like you're on a mission, like, look, I got some weight I got to get off my body, or I got some problems I need to get off my chest. You're going to walk like you have a mission. You're not just going to be sitting and dragging your feet. You understand that? So when you think about walking, this is something you want to do. It could be as simple as 15 minutes one direction, 15 minutes back. It could be just that simple, okay? So super simple. Continuing, get some good sunlight as much as you can get. We know we're in British Columbia. We know sometimes the sun is not there for us as much as we would like. Hence, we may have to go ahead and get some vitamin D3 supplementation. If you have to do that, that's okay. But when the sun comes out, like today, go outside. Go outside, get some good sunlight. And then always keep your body well hydrated. You got to drink your water, folks. Drink water. Don't say, well, my soda has water. You know, you wouldn't wash your clothes in soda, so why would you wash your body with it? You wouldn't wash your clothes in orange juice, so why would you wash your body with orange juice? You see how some of these logics that the world gives us is nonsense? I mean, seriously, I think about medical professionals that actually tell people there's water in coffee, there's water in soft drinks, there's water in orange juice, and I'm like, okay, so why don't you wash your clothes in it? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy. They're going to say, wash my clothes? Excuse me, sir, I can't wash my clothes in orange juice. And they're going to go through a whole list of logic. It's the same principle. Water is the natural cleansing agent yours and my body needs to stay clean, to stay healthy, and to stay fully functional. And you are not hydrating your body in the way it needs hydration when you think that you're compensating it through drinking a Red Bull or drinking some other soft drink. You got to drink your water. How much water? Very simple. I'm going to give you a nice equation. Super simple. I heard you use ounces out here, so thank the Lord for that. Half your body weight in fluid ounces. Take it in a day. You weigh 200 pounds. You want to go ahead and get yourself 100 fluid ounces of water, and you want to consume that in a day. The only time this number can drop is when you're having a lot of raw food intake. The more raw food intake you're having, raw food does have a water content. So depending on how much raw food you ate, maybe you'll go ahead and minimize a cup out of the equation. But at the end of the day, you want to keep your body well hydrated. So if you got a 5-year-old, half his or her body weight in fluid ounces. If you're a 50-year-old, half your body weight in fluid ounces. The goal is not 8 glasses of water. You can't tell a child to take 8 glasses of water, and you can't tell a 500-pound man to drink 8 glasses of water. His body needs a lot more water. So the goal is take your body weight, divide it in half. Whatever that number is, that's how much you want to get in fluid ounces. And spread it out. You'll have some water in the morning, have some mid-morning, have some in the afternoon, have some mid-afternoon. Spread it out. Don't chug it. Don't say, uh-oh, I didn't drink any water today. And just, chug it all down and your belly's literally popping out while you're drinking. Don't go there. Just spread it out throughout the day. It's much, much easier. Okay? So that's your water. When you think of it, these are just examples. If we do not drink enough water, the body will take it from the following areas. So the body's going to get what it needs. So we don't want to put ourselves in the place where we're so dehydrated that the body goes in emergency state and starts taking water from the bones and from the cells and from the brain and all these other things. Give your body the water it needs. In addition to that, get some good sunlight. Again, vitamin D. Here's what they found. Vitamin D may lower blood pressure by altering renin, And this enzyme constricts blood vessels and raises blood pressure. So you have something called renin, which is an enzyme that it usually constricts the blood vessels. The more sunlight you get, it actually causes the vessels to dilate, and as a result of that, the renin gets altered, and hence it helps your blood pressure. In addition to that, increasing insulin sensitivity. Insulin resistance is a risk factor for high blood pressure. That's why diabetes and high blood pressure, they're like first cousins. Usually those who are hypertensive are diabetics. Usually those who are diabetics are hypertensive. So this also helps with that. And tomorrow when we talk about diabetes type 2, we'll go a little bit more. It reduces arterial calcification. Now that's what we want. That is what you want. Because remember, arterial calcification, that is what can lead ultimately to blockage and then heart attack. So look at that. It says reducing arterial calcification. Hardening of the arteries may contribute to high blood pressure. Vitamin D regulates calcium absorption and metabolism. Higher vitamin D levels help direct calcium to the bones and teeth rather than the soft tissues such as the arteries. So you want to get yourself some good sunlight, okay? Good sunlight. How much sunlight do you need? If you are caramel complexion or above, what we'll call light skin, you need 30 minutes per day in the sun. If you are under caramel complexion, we call that dark skin, and you're going to need 60 minutes. So a guy like me, I'm going to need 60 minutes in the sun. Why? Because I have a natural filter called melanin. And that melanin works like a natural filter that it takes more time for me to get the benefit of the rays of the sun than it would someone who is lighter, who does not have as much melanin in their skin. So if you're Caucasian, or again, if you're, even African-American, Indian, what have you, but if you're around that caramel color or above, you would be classified as light skin, and therefore you can go ahead and get 30 minutes per day, and that's what you need. What are you going to do? Without sunscreen, if you use sunscreen, you lose the whole benefit, because that's what the sunscreen does. It's blocking. So you don't want to use sunscreen. And always remember, have your face, neck, and arms exposed for the time you need to go ahead and get some good sunlight exposure, get some good downloading of the rays of the sun, if you will. So these are things that work very, very well. And we've put people on these programs, and we have seen hypertension reverse over and over and over and over again. It is super simple. May not be easy, but it's simple. Let's bring out some final points. Herbal treatments, probably one of the best things that you can drink is garlic tea. If your blood pressure spikes, you can go ahead and take some garlic. You can take a clove or two, and that you can go ahead and you can boil some water, and you can put the cloves in the water and let it steep. Let it sit there for about 5 minutes. When it steeps and sits there for 5 minutes, you can take the top off of the cup, and you can go ahead and start drinking the water. It's your garlic tea, and it will help regulate your blood pressure. It may not low. If you have low blood pressure, it can bring it up. If you have high blood pressure, it'll bring it down. So when you think about taking garlic tea, it's fantastic. It literally is a regulator of the blood pressure. So these, again, are things that we all can do and we can all take. But while there are all these things, diet, lifestyle, education, exercising, and all of these things, eating right, the one thing we also want to remember is that stress is a massive contributor to hypertension. Stress. One thing I'm learning about this world that we're living in today is that this world is loaded with it. You can find stressed out people all over the place. More and more the stories that we hear on the news nowadays is stories of stress and its results. And what's happening is we have a generation of people that even eat right and drink right and exercise, but they're still very stressed out. And you would be amazed at how being stressed out can really offset a lot of our good habits, and we can still be stricken with sickness and disease. I've learned something about stress. Stress is typically the absence of faith. I thought that was a very interesting thing. Stress is typically an absence of faith. You know, it's one thing when, you immediately have to lift something up that's a little heavier than you can lift, and you have to stress the muscles. Well, that can be good stress. There's a such thing as good stress. But when our lives are filled with worry, when we constantly see ourselves in a state of a quandary, we don't know what to do. Things are getting kind of hard. Things are getting kind of tough. And maybe because we don't know who God is, and maybe we don't even acknowledge him. Maybe we feel he's a fictitious character, and the Bible is one of those toy books to brainwash ignorant people. And if we have these kind of attitudes, then that means that you look to yourself to solve your problems. And I'm wondering how you're doing. And a lot of times, we start to discover our limitations real quick. There are some pressures in life we can handle, but there's a lot of pressures of life we cannot handle and we cannot control. And when that happens, we get stressed. And stress can constrict those vessels. So therefore, what can we do? Well, one of the things is, like I said, stress is typically an absence of faith. And so what is it that we can do that can help us? I want you to think about this. This is what a lot of people are going through right now. Many are inquiring, how am I to make the surrender of myself even to God? You know, you hear Christians say things like, give your life to God. People say, how? We say, well, just trust him. How? Live for him. How? People don't even know how to surrender their lives to God. And as a result of this, look at what it says. Many are inquiring, how? How do I make the surrender of myself to God? You desire to give yourself to him, but you're weak in moral power, in slavery to doubt, and controlled by the habits of your life of sin. You know anybody like that? You know people who go through this kind of stuff? Maybe it's you. People just go through this all the time. And they're wondering, man, how do I get a grip? How do I control myself? How is it that I can control even my own habits? Going on, it says this. It says, your promises and resolutions are like ropes of sand. You ever made a promise and as fast as you made it, you broke it? You ever get to a point that you begin to see how unreliable you are? Forget how unreliable other people are. You ever get to that place where you start seeing even I'm unreliable? Because when I make promises, I can break them as fast as I promised them. Then it goes on to say, look at this. You cannot control your thoughts, your impulses, your affections. And then it says, forgive me. I want you to watch this because this is really important here. Bear with me one point. I want to bring it back. Yeah. Promises and resolutions like ropes of sand. Cannot control your thoughts, your impulses, your affections, and the knowledge of your broken promises. In other words, we make promises and break them so much, here's what happens. The knowledge of your broken promises and forfeited pledges weakens your confidence in your own sincerity and causes you to feel that even God can't accept you. There's a lot of people that get to this place. It's called a very serious place or state of despair. But the good news is you need not despair. If you're in that place, if you feel like life has dealt you a bad hand and you've been beaten down quite a bit and you're at a point right now that faith is a joke or at least an uncommon word to you and you don't even know how to exercise it even if you were willing to try. If you got to a place that you realize that I've made so many promises, I've hurt so many people, I have made so many decisions, I've been hurt by so many people, I'm scared to have faith, God says don't despair. Life is bad, but it's not over. It says, do not despair. All you need to do is simply understand the true force of something that is a precious gift. It's called the will. The will is what makes you and I different from monkeys. It makes us different from the animal kingdom. It's called the will. What is the will? This is the governing power in the nature of man, the power of decision or of choice. That's what makes you different. You have the ability to choose. You can actually choose things you don't even feel. I love that. There's some times that I may not feel like doing the right thing, but it doesn't mean that I have to succumb to that feeling. I can choose to still do the right thing even when I don't feel it, and then something special happens. Look at how it closes. It says, this is the governing power in the nature of man, the power of decision or of choice. Everything depends on the right action of the will. The power of choice God has given to men, it is theirs to exercise. That is a special gift that you have been given, is the ability to choose. You can actually choose things you don't even feel, yet you know is right. You know, we live in a very strange world today. In our world today, people say, if I feel it, then I'll do it. Anybody can do that. But a real man and a real woman is somebody who says, though I feel it, I will not do it, because to do it would be wrong. Though I don't feel it, I will do it, for to do it is right. This is a wonderful gift that we all have been given, and it means everything. So notice it closes by saying, you cannot change your heart. I'm letting you know right now, you can't. We can act, but you can't change your heart. You cannot change your heart. You cannot of yourself give to God its affections, but you can choose to serve him. You can give him your will, and then he will then work in you to will and to do of his good pleasure. I leave this with you tonight. If any of you are in here and you are afflicted with stress, and you are afflicted to a point in your life that you're saying, I don't have faith. I don't have faith in God. I don't have faith in myself, and I don't have faith in anybody. I am simply living by the principle of evolution, survival of the fittest. And I'm going to do what I got to do till I can't do it anymore. And when I can't do it anymore, then I'll go down and I'll just become history. My friend, I'm here to let you know God wanted to give you a much greater legacy than that. That's not why he gave you the breath of life this morning. And so it is that if you have hypertension, hey, you put these things into practice, I believe even you will be surprised at the simplicity of the power of God and the change of lifestyle and how you can overcome the things that we're still being told, even in 2015, with all the advancement of technology, is an incurable disease. But God says, I want to do more than cure a disease. He says it's not enough to cure hypertension. He wants to cure the cancer of the soul, a life of sin, a life of selfishness. You have more to live for than even yourself. There are people in your life that I'm sure God would love to work in and through you, that you may be a blessing to them. And so if you just want to leave with the benefit of just following the teachings of hypertension so you can have a hypertensive-free life, then you know what? Go ahead and leave with that if that's all you want. But I'm here to let you know that God wants to give so much more. So much more. I'd love to tell you my story one day. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'll ever have enough time. But I will tell you, I used to be in entertainment. Used to be a dancer and a choreographer in the hip hop and R&B industry. Used to work with a lot of famous hip hop stars and a lot of singers. And I used to be on television, music videos. There are music videos with me on it today, and I will not tell you. And I used to dance with all the celebrities, made tons of money, thousands of dollars in a month. Limousines would pick me up in front of my house and take me over to different places, traveled all over the country and met all sorts of people, traveled all over the world, yeah. Did some international traveling. I was an incredible dancer. I was very good. I can tell you that. I was very good. And many people would think that that was the height of life. You're in entertainment, you're on television, you're making $30,000, $40,000 in a month. You're working and sitting with the stars and dancing with them and going to clubs and everything else. And people think that that stuff is where life is. What they don't understand is that I was not happy. Money doesn't make you that happy. Money can give you moments, but it doesn't hold you. It wasn't those things that made me happy. It was when I realized my need for God and the more that I came to him and understand his will and his way for my life. This is when I found a joy that's unspeakable. And I didn't need another stimulus to keep me going because God was enough. My hope and my prayer is that tonight that you've heard something that you'll say, you know what, I'll consider him a little bit more. I'll think about him a little bit more. Maybe I'll study the Bible a little bit more. Maybe I'll start praying about my disease. Maybe I will go ahead and try some of these lifestyle changes, and I'll go ahead and prove God and see if he really means everything he said. My hope and my prayer is that you leave with something special. I'm going to get ready to close right here, and I want to show you this thing. I would imagine that you all probably got one at one point, and that's our little card here. Did you all get this? Did you all get these? Ooh, you were supposed to get one of these. Well, I would imagine as I see my friend is standing here that, you know, he would go ahead and put these in your hand. Now, I want you to take it because we're going to do something special for you in the event you'd like it. What we're going to do here is I want you to look at this card. It's obviously our Take Charge of Your Health card, and it's very simple. It's an invitation for a consultation. Sometimes we have different lifestyles than the average person. Maybe there's some unique things going on in our lives, and we say to ourselves, you know what, I'd like some help. If you'd like, I want you to look at this card, and I want you to go ahead and fill it out. What it says is something very simple. I would like to have a one-on-one lifestyle consultation for the following. And it says diabetes, hypertension, arthritis, cancer, weight control, stop smoking, or other. If it's an other, you can just put it on the back. You just fill out whatever the other is on the back. What we're going to do over the next few days is, and it begins tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to avail ourselves and make some time. And what we're going to do is take some time to sit down with you for a one-on-one lifestyle consultation. Number one, it's free. It's totally free, no cost. I want to make that clear. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to your lifestyle and help put together a program that will meet you where you're at in your lifestyle of how, by the grace of God, you can overcome whatever's ailing you. So you go ahead and put it down. In other words, we want to be of service to you. The service is not here on a stage or on a pulpit. The service is when we get to sit down, to talk with you, to help instruct you, to cry with you, to pray with you, to labor with you, to give you the practical help that you need. That's what I remember Jesus doing when he walked on this earth. I want to follow his example. Don't worry, we won't preach to you. We don't believe in forcing people to believe anything. It doesn't work anyhow. Even if we tried to force you, it wouldn't be genuine. And I don't know about you. Would you want somebody that every time you said, "Do you love me?" they said, "Yes, I do, dear"? You wouldn't want anybody like that in your life. God doesn't either. God doesn't want you to fake loving him. He wants you to love him freely and choose him freely. And so it is that, don't worry, we're not here to proselytize you, try to get you in a church so we can count you as a number. That's not what we're trying to do. That's definitely not my mission. We're here to just simply say, do you need help? I think we're equipped to help you. Why don't you let us help you? That's why I'm here. So if you want help, if you believe that there's something you're ailing with, that you say, I would like some help, then we want to make you a priority. We want to make you a priority, and this is the way we can do it. So you help us help you, okay? You go ahead and fill it out and put it up there. And if there is someone who says, you know what? Hey, you know what? I am willing to give God a try. Let's say there's somebody that's on that level. Some people just want the physical benefit. We understand that. But let's say there's somebody who says, I'm willing to give God a try. Don't know how, you know, I pray, I don't mind reading the Bible. I don't mind doing any of these things. I'm willing to try. But how? Maybe there's even one person in this room that says, I've tried God and he has failed me. Why should I give him another try? Maybe you're scared to trust him. Maybe you want to understand his words better. Whatever it may be, if you're such a person, then I want you to take the back of your card and I want you to just put a little B there for me, just the letter B. And what that means is, again, like I said, that means when you put that B there on the back of your card, you're simply saying, I'm willing to give God a try. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're scared to trust him. Maybe you've doubted him. Whatever it may be, but you're willing to give him a try, to say, you know what? I'm not going to try to overcome this disease independent of God. I'm willing to go ahead and try it. And I'm even going to be willing to depend on him. I'm going to give him a shot to make himself real in my life. I just want you to put a little letter B there for me. And then that way, we know best how to serve you. It has been such an absolute privilege sharing with you tonight, and I hope you've been blessed. I hope we all understand a little bit more about the silent killer, hypertension, but more importantly, how by the grace of God to overcome it. And so if you're willing to just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give God a try. I'm going to go ahead and give some of these principles a try, whatever it may be, if you're willing to just give it a shot. Let's all stand together. I'd like to go ahead and close with a word of prayer for the evening and then allow you all to be dismissed as you head back home on your lovely way. Let's all, if you don't mind, let's stand together and let's go ahead and let's close with a word of prayer. All right? Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we are so grateful. Thank you, Lord, for your patience. Thank you for loving us. Even sometimes when we don't recognize you, we don't acknowledge you, you still continue to shower us with your love. You truly have something called amazing grace. But Lord, we do realize that a time does eventually come where grace can run out and judgment can begin. It's our desire to be on the right side when such a day comes, and it's coming. Give us wisdom. Help us to make right choices. It's a gift you've given to us. And I thank you for it. May you bless all of these wonderful people, even beyond their expectations. For those who are ailing, may you give them victory, especially as they cooperate with you. And I thank you that you've heard this prayer and also that you have answered it. For we do ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you all. Have a very good night, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow night, our subject is diabetes type 2. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night.